Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for our first edition of Inside the Zone Komets style. Shane Albahrani joining us for the second year in a row, the voice of the Komets. We're glad to have you, Shane, and we'll be talking Komets throughout the rest of the season, spicing in a couple of guests like we did last year. So every Monday we'll be checking in with you. As far as the team goes, 37 games into a 72-game schedule, roughly 50%. Let's start there. Halfway through the season, what is your takeaway from this team? What have you seen? What are some of the things that they're going to be working on to make a playoff run and make a push in the postseason?
Well, I think getting everybody healthy. That has been
that's kind of a big deal.
That is the thing, yeah. Illness has come through the locker room. Injuries have gone through the locker room. It happens every season, happens to every team, but it seemed like this year it happened at a much higher rate. Just happened really quick. So when we went on that big road trip out west, that 2-week road trip, it seems like everything kind of happened right at the tail end of that road trip. Guys got sick, guys got injured. So next week we're hoping to get close to that roster that we had opening 2 weeks of the season. So really getting healthy is the most important thing. But this team is in a good spot. You're at the halfway point. You're in third place. You're certainly not out of the hunt at all, even though you've fallen back a little bit. But again, you're in a good spot, and you've got a lot of games against teams in your own division the second half.
That sounds like my household after Christmas. It was like everybody was getting everybody else sick, and now all we want to do is be healthy.
That's right. That's kind of what they're hoping for.
Yeah. When you take a look at, obviously, the biggest change in the offseason was Ben Boudreau taking over for Gary Graham. What are some of the similarities and differences that you've seen, and how has Ben kind of imparted all of his hockey knowledge onto this team and really maybe imprinted some of the things that he wants to stress to this Komets program?
Yeah, Ben, his main focus was to get younger, and that's what he did. You still have another vet spot hanging out there. You only have 3 vets right now, so that's a pretty important card to be holding when you're going down the stretch, and guys are coming back from Europe, and you want to make a trade maybe. So that's very important. Last year the vet spots were pretty much taken before the offseason really got going. So that's a big change. So you have a lot of youth. You had a lot of guys coming out of juniors, a lot of guys who this is their first pro season. So it is a learning curve for them. So. But those younger players are getting better. But again, it just gets back to having that consistent lineup.
When you talk a little bit about the past week, it was a little bit of hot and cold. Unfortunately, I suffered a 3-2 loss against Idaho. I know the schedule didn't do a whole lot of favors in the way that it played out. But Anthony Petruzzelli, 2 goals in the loss on Friday, 2 goals in the win at Wheeling, and then you fell 4-2 against Idaho on Sunday. What's your big takeaway in this week? Obviously, Petruzzelli played very good hockey, 4 goals in the first 2 games of the weekend.
Yeah, Petey is a guy who's just a grinder. Half of his goals came in the last 2 games there in the weekend. So, he's a guy who you're going to look to definitely down the stretch. He's a guy who's durable. Gets in the corners. He likes to muck it up, score those dirty goals. So it's nice to see him heat up. But this weekend was kind of weird because of the travel. The Komets had to go to Wheeling after the game Friday night, play a Saturday night in Wheeling, come back and play a Sunday afternoon basically against Idaho, a team that got the day off in Fort Wayne on Saturday.
Not too shabby for them.
Yeah, so it makes a big difference. Especially when you're fighting injuries and illness like that. The guys really didn't get a whole lot of rest. So and that Idaho team. It's a pretty good team. So, and that's a team that the Komets, that type of team you're going to have to beat. So, it was a good test. It was a good test of the weekend. It was nice to get that win on Saturday in convincing fashion too. It wasn't even close. She came out, dropped a 6 spot on him, and then Cole Keeler just played out of his mind all night long. So, you can kind of rack that up to, the travel kind of stung us a little bit, but pretty happy really overall because the weekend, even though you lost 2 games, you got 2 points on Saturday. The team you're chasing, Toledo, they lost all 3 games at home, and that's something that doesn't happen. So even you lost 2 games, you still gained a point on Toledo.
Yeah, and you take a look at this week, not only this week, but next week, some really big games against teams ahead of you in the standings. You got Cincinnati on Friday on the road, and then Toledo at home this coming Saturday. Only 2 games, but those are the 2 teams that you're chasing in the standings. So really this week, some games imminent and important when it comes to what you want to accomplish in the long term.
Yeah, the next 5 games actually are going to be very telling for this team because you're starting off the second half of the season. Like you said, you got Cincy on the road, Toledo at home, and then the week after that, you've got Indy on the road, a team that is just a couple points behind you. Then you got a pair in Toledo. before another big road trip. So the next 5 games are going to be serious business for the Komets. And again, hopefully this week, you're going to get guys back in the lineup.
When you take a look at some of the guys that have been impressive so far this season, who's really jumped out at you that maybe you didn't expect? Obviously, the guys that you expected. Sid's playing very well. He's been awesome on the power play in terms of assists and becoming a playmaker. And just some of the guys we've expected. AJ Jinx has fallen into that. I shouldn't say fallen. Adapted well to that leadership role. Obviously, he's a captain now. So those guys are kind of doing some of the things that we expected. Who are some of the guys that really stepped up in your opinion?
Alan Lasarchik is a huge one. He was a guy who, when you see his last name, I kind of thought it was, wow, that's a joke. Someone's messing with me.
Spell check,
all those letters. But he was a guy who was 100 points in the OHL last year. He's a smaller size forward. He's a guy who just kind of fell through the cracks, I think. But he has just been spectacular. I think he's 4th in scoring among rookies in the ECHL. So he has been a very pleasant surprise.
If you had to name an MVP at this point in the season, I know we're right at the midpoint, who would it be? Because Brady Shaw's numbers are right up there in terms of scoring. His assists, I think he's 3rd in the ECHL with 27 assists. 4th, I think, and 3rd in terms of points with 42. He'd be up there. Sedlowski is one of the leaders in power play assists. Again, Jinx with the leadership. I mean, there's a number of guys, and some of the guys that have been really good have, not unsurprisingly, been called up and been up and down. So these are guys that have been with you, pretty much all season long.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say Brady Shaw. I mean, he has really been a difference maker. When the Komets were on that 8-game slide, he came back and he scored 6 points in 2 games, and and the Komets broke the skid there with 2 straight wins. So I would have to say Brady Shaw because he's a real difference maker. But 2 other guys, Sean Saint-Amant and AJ Jenks. They've missed considerable amount of time. And if you look at the Komets record, when those guys are in the lineup and not in the lineup, it's considerable because those 2 guys, when they're on the ice, the other team has to prepare a lot different when those guys are not on the ice. And I think that is a big deal because Saint-Amant has now missed 15 games. AJ, I think, has missed 11 overall. And that's huge. That's a lot of amount of game when you got the guy who's just the pure scorer on your team, Sean Saint-Amant, who's shown that he is going to be the scorer and your number 1 faceoff guy and your leader in AJ Jenks.
When you take a look at some of the numbers, the Komets have had kind of an extreme season, whether it's been the good or the bad. Like, they're not in the middle in a lot of ECHL categories. They're either on one end or the other. They're number 5 in goals for. So they're averaging about 3.8 goals a game. Pretty impressive, but they're number 7 in goals allowed. There's only like a 7-goal difference. They've scored 140. They've given up 133, so good in the bad there. They're number 3 in penalty minutes after a lot of penalty minutes this past weekend. They came into the weekend 5th, and now that's not a category you want to move up in, but they're up to 3rd. On the flip side, they're number 3 in power play. They're converting almost 25%. So they're really good at some things and they're not so good at some things, but they're definitely not in the middle in a lot of these categories.
Yeah, and that's then when you're giving up the same amount of goals as you're getting, you're going to be a 500 club, and that's what the Komets have been the past few weeks. One of the things that jumps off for the stats go is 51 first period goals. So this team likes to get out early, and when they get the lead early, they tend to keep it. So good starts have really been the cornerstone of this team this year. So, but it's just the defense hasn't been consistent. Goaltending also has been up and down. So those are the 2 things you got to improve on. But getting guys like Jenks and Saint-Amant back, you're going to see that goal average start to rise a little bit. But and early on this season, the Komets were winning games 7-6, 6-5. You can't do that all season. You certainly can't do that in the playoffs. So the second half is going to be, what do we got to do to get the defense and the goaltending settled down?
That's the big question to me. It kind of led into my big question is, and I know we talked about it with Ben a week and a half ago, goaltending. Where are we with the goaltending? We've seen Munson, we've seen Ferguson gets pulled apparently with sickness this weekend. Keeler also. I mean, like, where are we in goaltending? Like, that's the one thing. I can see a lot of guys going up and down, but that's the one thing I never know what's happening in terms of the goaltending for the Komets.
Yeah, we knew it was going to be a weird situation having 2 affiliates, which is something, it's not a normal thing. So you're going to get 2 affiliate goaltenders. They were going to be up and down, and plus you also know that they have to play. So, but the Komets went into a funk there. Keeler and Ferguson, they were up and down. So you bring in Patrick Munson due to a call up to Ferguson, also injured, and so Munson kind of hung around, and you throw him in there, and he broke the slump. He got 2 straight wins, and of course got him a third start, and unfortunately came up a little short. But he has been really, really good. He's actually been the most consistent goaltender the Komets have had. But Cole Keeler, he has shown flashes of greatness, like he did Saturday night in Wheeling, and Dylan Ferguson, unfortunately, we just don't know what he has, because he is the real deal. I mean, he's a guy who Las Vegas is very high on, but he just has not been able to stay healthy, and plus he gets bounced back and forth a little bit, so he just has not been able to really get a consistent amount of ice time. So maybe if he sees a lot more minutes and able to stay healthy, he will be the number one that everyone thought he was going to be.
Yeah, and he's got a little NHL pedigree.
Yeah.
I know a couple years ago when they went through some injuries, he spent some time in the NHL. I think he only got in one game.
Yeah, he got in one game.
But he was
still,
around for like
yes.
a month, so he
Yes.
really has had a chance as a young guy to absorb what everything was about. Going forward, kind of what are you looking forward to about the Komets this week? What are some of the things that you're looking to see them establish on Friday night to say, kick off this big 5-game stretch and say, okay, man, we're here to play. We're here to move up in the standings. We're here to get things, right the ship to a
Yeah,
certain
you're going on Cincinnati on the road. That is going to be a huge win, especially if you can come out, again, if everybody is healthy, if Sean St. Amant makes it back, if A.J. Jenks make it back, if Matt Bowdens is back in the lineup, he's missed a couple of games. If you get that full lineup back and you're able to get that win and on the road, and not just a tight game. I would love to see the Komets win that game going away like they did Saturday, to be that big confident builder going into the game Saturday against Toledo, because combined against Cincinnati and Toledo, they're 1-6-1, and those are the teams you got to beat. The teams that are ahead of you. So this weekend is going to be very telling.
All right. Good stuff from Shane Albahrani. We'll be talking about Komets hockey again a week from today on Wayne.com. He's Shane. I'm Glenn. We'll see you next Monday on Inside the Zone.